Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney Save. Today we're going to be working on a Frozen themed speed build. Basically this entire section of Mount Komorebi has become Frozen themed, and we had a really large lot off to the right of the previous build that we did, which was the Olaf Ice Cream Parlor, otherwise known as Latte Go. So this entire upper section of the mountain I've really reserved for Frozen themed speed builds, and one of the things that Mount Komorebi introduced as a special feature to Snowy Escape was rental lots. And I'm a really big fan of the idea of rental lots. I'm such a big fan that I wish they would actually just go back and change the other vacation worlds and make them normal, residential, livable worlds. And then you can add like rental sections or rental lots in as you would please. And please, like, no more vacation worlds. And that's purely like a selfish thing on my part, because it would be so much easier to complete the Disney Save if the vacation worlds were not marked as these like getaways, because then you can't have Sims living there, and it creates this conflict where there's a lot of characters that would fit really well in worlds like Granite Falls or Selva Dorada, but I can't actually have Sims live there. And I do think the Star Wars world is a little bit different. I wouldn't be surprised if nothing ever changes with that one, but I just think it would be so cool if we could actually live in worlds like that, and then you could do rental sections, and it still kind of creates the similar idea of being able to go on vacation. But nonetheless, I think that the idea of a rental lot is a really good one. It's not quite hotels, but we can create something sort of similar, at least in the shell and the essence of the build. So that's what we're going to be doing today. This is a recreation of a section of Arendelle Village, and it is going to function as a rental. So if you go for the mountain excursion, maybe you're in the area, maybe you're coming from a different world and you just want to have a vacation spot in the wintry oasis of the top of Mount Komorebi, this is going to be your location. So basically I went through a few phases with this build where I was using different things for reference. I did a preliminary search before I started to try to find some references of the Arendelle Village that had a specific style to them. I was looking for things that were colorful. A lot of color was really requested in my previous builds for Frozen, and I was kind of holding out because I knew that this build and the Arendelle Castle were both going to maintain quite a bit of color. So I knew that I wanted a little bit of color. I knew that I wanted this like very classic Norwegian village look, and obviously we want to replicate from the movie the best that we possibly can. And I found some concept art that I think had been done in preparation for the first Frozen movie that I was using originally when we first started this build. And that's where we got this like rainbow color scheme where all of the houses are very much the same in design. But I decided after a little bit of toying with them and kind of looking at the overview map and just really struggling with the build in this first phase that I didn't love it. And I think it was the choice in the wallpaper, although I really did love the idea of doing this like brightly colored rainbow set of village houses. It didn't really fit with everything else that had been done so far. So we're going to tone it back a little bit later on in the video, but it ended up working out because when I went live, one of the 3 days that I was building this village, someone had suggested to me to go watch Olaf's Frozen Adventure because apparently part of it is him going in and out of village homes. So you get some cool reference of like the interior of some of these village houses and also like more perspective on the exterior. And I also rewatched sections of Frozen where they do go into and out of the village, but in particular Olaf's Frozen Adventure was really, really helpful because it did show the interior. It showed like what types of tiles, what types of wallpaper, and what these like sections ended up actually looking like in the movie. Because although concept art can be really helpful, sometimes concept art is not exactly what they ended up going with. So for the concept art, I almost feel like a lot of it was a lot more brightly colored than what they actually ended up using in the movie. So I felt a little bit better after rewatching some sections of Frozen and Olaf's, and felt more comfortable going into it, and I started to make some changes that I think really help make this build feel a lot better. So basically I built an entire shell. It is these 5 houses with no room in between them, no sort of pathways in between, kind of squished together, almost as if it's a section of the village that we've just sort of removed for the greater part of Arendelle. And you can stay here as rentals. So there are 5 individual rentals. Every single one has bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, living room, dining room. And so when you come here, you can sort of pick what kind of an experience you want. Some of them are a little bit more lavish than others. Some have bars, some have pianos, some are more squished. A few are 2 bedrooms. And so you could do like multiple groups of Sims and bring them on the mountain and then come stay here in the vacation rental and all stay like in the cozy little home. And the first house, the red one on the front, actually has a special like check-in area. Now, obviously, this build took me a lot longer than it was supposed to. It was actually scheduled to be this past Wednesday's video, and I knew that this was going to take me a while, but I think because I struggled so much with the exterior and basically ended up doing it twice between the roofing and picking out new colors and new windows and sort of like reorganizing everything to match a lot better to what I had seen in Olaf's, it just took a monstrable amount of time. And so I ended up going live to start this build, and then when I came back to finish it, it ended up looking a lot different. And there will be a pretty big jump here in a few minutes where we basically change all of the wallpapers and I start changing a lot of the windows. I was originally going with the Strangerville windows because I love them. I've been using them in a lot of the Frozen themed builds so far. And they come in a lot of really great colors. There's so many swatches and they all match really well, but they didn't actually look very close to a lot of the reference I was using from the movie. Another thing that was a little bit tiring and I think is why this build took so long, something I've talked about quite a bit when it comes to doing these Frozen builds, because they're based after some kind of Norwegian architecture, there is a lot of little hand carving and details and extra wood bits in exteriors of buildings. And for Olaf's, I was able to capture that in some like custom hand carved poles that sort of frame the building. That wasn't really the case for the village, but there would be little details on the buildings and on the homes that I felt like were so important, and I was struggling with how I was going to capture them between having multiple frames and these like brightly colored columns outlining the homes and almost making them look like they are sort of like sketched out, with the contrast between some kind of a red wallpaper and then the blue framing of the home, which was very common in a lot of the village homes. They had like that drastic contrast between them. There was a lot of framing, and you can only do so much of that column work and of the framing of the home in The Sims 4 because it's sort of like an auto tool. You just drag it and drop it to where you want it on the house and it'll like frame a section of the home. There's really no way to place any of that individually, and it won't let you place it on different levels. So I was just having a lot of problems because I wanted them to all match one another. I wanted them to look seamless. And so I had to find windows, wallpaper, columns, and framing that all matched and all could come in like a lot of colors so that I could still get this very bright and colorful look, but have them all feel cohesive together. And it was a struggle, to say the least, especially because between packs, colors tend to shift a little bit. So what a blue looks like from a Strangerville pack might be a slightly different blue from Discover University. And it was a lot of trial and error, but I think that I got it. Basically, to start out, I was so far off track from what I wanted, and even sort of leaving the live from the first time that we had built like the original shell, I knew I didn't like it, and I sat on it for a few days, which is always like a really good thing to do instead of just sitting there and trying to force myself to keep building, which I do sometimes do because I can like work my way out of it. But 9 times out of 10, it's better to just take a few days break, and it puts a delay in my schedule, but the break allows me to really think about it a little bit more and come back with a fresh perspective. And I think it ended up being the reason that this build turned out so much better. I feel so much better about it now. It actually feels like something that I'm happy is in the save file, and before I really wasn't sure about it. So it's always good to just take a little bit of a break and really maybe go look at some more references, get a little bit more perspective on the whole thing. Ultimately, we ended up using some Strangerville windows, but I didn't use the ones with the sort of pointed top. We just used the plain square ones, and I used those pretty much across the board for all of them to sort of make them look cohesive. And then again, the columns, those are actually get together columns. They come in a lot of colors, which worked out really well. And I believe that the wallpaper is a base game wallpaper. I almost never use base game stuff, but for village builds and these like old-timey builds, base game really works. There's a lot of stuff in there that is very dated and just stuff that I feel like was in previous Sims games, and so when they recreate the base game, they will make a lot of the same items. And you get these like classic timeless sort of items. You get the clocks, the grandfather clocks, the little knickknacks that are just a little bit older looking in nature, those types of things. And they actually really work. Now, the difference between this build being a village build and like Belle's Village is still pretty drastic. Belle's Village had this old like French look to it. The roofing is quite a bit different. A lot of that used like the wallpapers from Get Together that have sort of the beaming running through it. These look almost like they could be more modern in their design, almost like townhomes, but when you go on the interior, you'll see that there's a lot of natural wood, a lot of darker wood tones, a lot of things that are handmade and hand carved, which is very indicative of like a lot of the stuff that they've shown so far in Frozen. And I was thinking about Oakens as well when doing this, and how everything in there was sort of like dark wood tones. But even going through Olaf's and looking at the background of some of the scenes of Olaf in the houses, most of the time it was pretty dark. A lot of it was darker wallpapers, darker flooring, sort of chocolate and dark, deep brown woods. On occasion, there were some homes that had lighter wallpaper and lighter furniture and lighter brick. And so I've made a little bit of a variation here where the exterior sort of matches the interior in the color scheme. So the red one is a little bit darker. We've gone with more of a neutral color scheme for the light blue and the pink one, and the dark blue and the green one have that like orangey natural wood tone. So basically they all have very different looking auras on the inside with still this like sort of cohesive feel. Very Realm of Magic, lots of Strangerville, lots of base game, a little bit of Discover University, probably a little bit of Jungle Adventure here as well, because that pack comes with quite a bit of like that handmade feeling stuff. And the only one that we're really going to show the interior for as far as the decoration goes is the first home, because it's quite a bit different than the other ones given the shape. And that first home, the red one, actually contains like a check-in station where you might come in and check into your rental and then go from there to your designated village rental home. So that one is different, and I wanted to show like the little setup of the check-in station. Even though the rest of it does actually function as a rental too, there is still a bedroom and like a full kitchen and everything behind the check-in area. So still 5 in total, but I really wanted to focus on showing you guys that first one just because it has a little bit of a different layout than the other ones. And then all of the other houses are using pretty much identical furniture in different colors and identical setups and wallpapers and all of that. So it got very repetitive. It was essentially decorating 5 homes back to back. And that is also why it took me quite a bit of time to do this. And I didn't feel like it was super necessary to show like every single furniture placement for this one just because a lot of it was so repetitive. However, if you stay for the very last part of the video, there will of course be some screenshots that help to give you guys the full perspective of what everything looks like. But basically what we did in the first one is what I matched across the board for all of the other homes, as long as the furniture came in like the correct color palette. There were a few things here and there that didn't really work. I had to change out some of the beds on occasion. I was using a lot of Realm of Magic beds, and I ended up using the Outdoor Retreat beds because it has like that handmade curved framing. And I think a little bit of vampires as well. This is actually a pretty heavy vampires build. One of the things that's good about vampires, obviously not for the darker tones of the vampire stuff. A lot of that comes in like dark blacks and browns and ruby reds and things that really wouldn't work well for this build, but it's very intricate. The patterns on the wallpapers matched really, really well with what I was seeing from the references. And there are a couple of swatches from the Vampires pack that are a little bit lighter and just come in like these beautiful light blues and whites. So we ended up using a lot of Vampires doors, a lot of that stuff. Now, as far as fixing the problem on the exterior, where I wasn't able to get the proper amount of detail. Like I wanted to be able to do 2 layers of framing on the home. I wanted to be able to maybe add something to the exterior that gives it a little bit more detail, something special about it, so it doesn't look so modern and it doesn't have like this townhouse feel, because it's supposed to be a village and it was just like a very complicated mix of stuff. I ended up using a very similar idea to something that I did in Olaf's ice cream parlor. If you've seen that speed build, you know that there is a light that comes with Eco Lifestyle. It's a handmade light that your Sims can craft, and it's sort of this like very bright octagonal light. And I used them in the previous speed build to create these little snowflake patterns all over the ice cream parlor with the white lights. And when I was going through the references, I noticed that the buildings have a lot of like carvings into the wood in that very sort of similar style. And I was trying to think, how can I like replicate it? And I decided that it would probably be best to just add a little bit of detailing to the exterior of these homes using those very same lights and coordinate the colors to match the exterior. That part is not going to be included in the video because it took forever, including also my solution to the second level of framing, which basically above the windows on the second floor, I wanted to be able to have the same breaking that, I don't know what the proper term would be for it, the cutoff that sort of like shows the separation of the 2 levels of the building. You guys can see that there's one already placed on the exterior here. I wanted another one above the windows, and without being able to place it with the auto system, you have to do it manually. And so one of my favorite tricks to do is take a cutting board that is like a wall mounted cutting board from Cool Kitchen Stuff, I believe, and use it to create like a very similar idea. It doesn't always work because there's a lot of little scratches and divots in the cutting board, but for the village builds and this like theme of the builds, I think it's okay. I think it works. So you'll see it a little bit here and there as we go throughout the interior of this first home, but you'll definitely see what I mean a lot better in the screenshots, as well as the snowflakes detail that really makes this build look so pretty at night and very special. Instead of just being lit up by like street lamps out in the front, the snowflake lights light up the front of the buildings. And so you get these beautiful village homes that are lit up with gorgeous little intricate snowflake patterns all over the building. And I really think that it's special, and it's very Frozen, it's very Arendelle, without going too crazy, because there is a little bit of like a simplicity factor to doing a village build. Now, the other thing that obviously I think is important is the fact that this is a rental. So whereas if I was doing houses for Arendelle Village and I was planning on making Sims actually live there, I might clutter them up. I might make them have a little bit of character, some weird things here and there that village homes might have. Like even when I was going through the references, each home was very different, and there were things about it that were indicative of like the character that lived there. But this is a rental. So when you go to a rental, and if you think about it as like a hotel, you imagine that everything is a little bit neutral and generic, and there will be some clutter and some things there. But for the most part, rentals are made to feel like anybody could live there. So when you come and you have your stuff, you can sort of like put your stuff away, and it feels very homey because there's nothing about it that has any like character or takes it in the direction of like any type of person. They're just super neutral. So when it comes to decorating the actual like living quarters for these places, I went super basic, especially for my standards and the fact that I enjoy clutter a lot. We went very basic. Like counters are pretty much spotless. There might be a shelf here and there. There might be a painting here and there, depending on which one you're staying in. And they each do have some differences just given the shapes on the exterior. Some of them are a little bit skinnier. This one has a angled side window, and so it just created like a different shape for the bathroom. So they're different in the layout, but the furniture, the feel, and the sort of like neutrality of them is very similar, which is why I didn't feel like it was necessary, again, to include the footage for all of them. But you'll see what I mean a little bit more in the screenshots. And like I mentioned, We have that little section where you would come in and check in. There's like a desk there. There's a little waiting area. There's a little nook that has maybe some supplies on it that whoever is running this motel, tavern, rental, whatever you'd like to call it, would have available to them, so that if somebody called for something, they need extra towels, extra candles, they would be available at like this front desk area, very similar to a hotel. And of course, if we ever got a hotel, it could easily be replaced. If we got like a hotel lot type, it could easily be replaced. But for now, we have rentals, and I want to try to include them as much as possible. Getting a new lot type is really exciting, so just doing this in concept, I think, is a really good solution. Also important to note, that will not actually function, obviously. Rentals are literally just homes. There is no lot requirement for them. The only difference is that you can stay here for like a daily fee instead of having people move in and out per the game operations, or, you know, obviously not having to purchase this lot so that your sim can live here. They can just come, pick a house, stay in it. And so it doesn't have any requirements, and that means that there really is no need for the desk area, but I thought it was cute, and it made a lot more sense to me to do it this way. So this first one, we have a rather large kitchen on the bottom floor. We have stairs that go up to the second floor, and that is where the bedroom, living room with the fireplace, and the bathroom are. This rental is very different than the other ones. It has a weird layout compared to the others. It has one of the largest bathrooms. The bedroom ended up being pretty small. I almost imagined that it was the rental of the person who works there, where they would stay like through the evening, so that there's always somebody on call for the rental location, but you don't maybe have the luxuries of some of the other ones. So it's a little bit more crammed, and the layout is a little bit weird, but it still has all of the things that the other ones do. It's just very strangely laid out. And there's a single bed in the bedroom, so we didn't get like the double bed. You couldn't really stay here with a couple, but I wanted to give the opportunity to have like different types of families and different types of sims being able to stay pretty comfortably. Something that was brought up on live is that this place will be a little bit expensive to stay at as far as a rental goes. I didn't know this until very late on, but apparently the price of how much it is to stay at a rental location is entirely dependent on the price of the lot and like what you use as items and basically how expensive is the build. And I don't really look at stuff like that when I'm building. Not only do I not look, but I have literally no idea what anything in the catalog costs at any point. I don't think I've ever done a home that was like on a budget or under 20,000 or something like that. It's really not up my alley. So I just build to build, and I think it ended up coming out to like 3,000 simoleons a day to stay here, which is very expensive. But couldn't you just picture some of the princess characters of the save coming and staying here and enjoying like the coziness of it all, get away from the royal life, the castle life, and even some of our other characters as well, obviously. It has a certain feel to it that'll be really fun, especially for characters that might not typically stay in a place like this. Like, imagine bringing Woody and Buzz here to stay. This is so outside of their alley. Well, I guess for Woody, maybe not in a lot of ways, but it would be fun. It's going to be fun if nothing else, and I'm not really going to concern myself too much when it comes to the prices of rentals. I never have like really worried about prices for lot types. I might try for like a starter Disney home in the save somewhere at some point, but I'm not gonna like promise it, because like I said, it's really just not up my alley at all. The last thing I want to mention is that recently there's been an update to The Sims 4, and we got an update basically to skin tones, and I've brought this up before, but I plan to go back and work on the makeup and the skin tones for every single Disney save sim that I have put out so far. I'm going to check all of them, make sure their skin tones are accurate, reapply makeup, fix them if some of them were wrong or I felt like a skin tone wasn't matching exactly right, and basically just do my best to overhaul a lot of them. Some of that might also include putting in extra outfits from new packs that we've gotten that maybe apply to certain characters. So don't be surprised if you're somebody who downloads all of my Disney Save Sims off the gallery if they get removed and put back up as a different version very shortly here. It's very possible. So just keep an eye out for that, as well as my Create a Sim thumbnails likely changing in the next few weeks here. I'm very unhappy with them, and that's part of the process as well. I'm going to be changing my thumbnails basically. So look out for the change. Speed builds will likely still stay the same, but I wanted to let you guys know that some changes are coming and that those things are in the works in the background of the Disney save. And that is going to be the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoy the screenshots. If you would like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in the description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Don't forget to follow me over on Twitch. I go live 3 times a week for The Sims Building Create a Sim and once a week for Variety Friday. We have a lot of fun over there. It is linked down below. I highly recommend you come over and hang out when you can. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Hit that little bell icon below to turn on post notifications so you can get updated every single time I post, and I will talk to you all in the next one.